Hello and welcome to the ACS takeover of Mountview Live. My name is Jasper Ryan-Cater. I'm currently a third-year actor. I'm also a founding member of the Mountview ACS, or Afro-Caribbean Society. Mountview Live is now in season 4. Can you believe it? It started all the way back at the start of lockdown, talking to some amazing people from the industry about all sorts of things, their lives, their creations, their aspirations. Before we kick off, I want to just say a little bit something about the ACS. Mountview ACS very simply aims to educate, enrich, uplift and empower performers and creatives that go through this institution at any stage in their career. We hope to do that by using our own cultural makeup and learnings to educate and hopefully learn with and from other people from all of the vast misrepresented, underrepresented cultures, of which there are many. And by doing that, we hope to affect change internally and then affect change externally. So that's my little spiel about the ACS and why I'm so passionate. Without further ado, I am gassed today to announce a very special guest who we fortuitously bumped into on Peck and Rye a few weeks back, Paapa Essiedu. How you doing, man?
I'm all good, man. Thank you for inviting me today. That's very inspiring hearing you talk about the work that you guys are doing at the ACS.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, we're a team very passionate, very dedicated to what we do. So yeah, well, let's kick off straight away. I was really interested to ask you, I think what's on everyone's minds at the moment, about creativity in those downtimes. Downtimes, not just when you're between jobs, but also in a time like this where people have got a lot more time on their hands. How have you found it? You know, staying sane, staying creative, staying positive in this time?
Yeah, man, it's a lot. It's obviously it's an unprecedented time for so many different reasons. You know, there's a health pandemic, there's a political pandemic, there's people coming in and out of White Houses, etc., etc. It feels like it feels like that bit of the film where shit really kicks off, right? And what is it like to be in the center of that? It is interesting, and creativity can either flourish, it can either bloom, or it can take a bit of a back seat at times like this. And I think the most important thing is to just accept that either of those outcomes are absolutely fine and absolutely right. Different things are going to happen for different people. And it doesn't mean it's wasted time, because I think we get there's pressure on us when we're like not literally doing something, or we're not working, when we're not at school, or whatever, that we need to be doing something to prove to ourselves that we're still artists and we're still actors, we're still whatever we do. We need to prove to ourselves. So we need to be writing and we need to be creating and devising and whatever. And that's such a kind of like tense and stressful and anxiety-ridden pathway to take that it's often going to provide an impediment to actually making something. And I think, yeah, especially as artists, I think we need to always recognize that we take inspiration from the world, from our lives, from everything, you know? So even kind of like sitting in your garden for like 6 hours or something, not writing or whatever, but just like taking in that moment, or taking in your surroundings, or talking to somebody or whatever, actually provides material for inspiration. And it will eventually organically develop into something. So like my mom always used to say, it's not by force, you know, you don't do it by force, you have to do it like when it feels right. And I think it's really important, especially at a time like this, when there's so many pressures around us, there's so much kind of like volatile energy out there in the world, that we have to be incredibly kind to ourselves and just like take the pressure off of ourselves, because that's the only thing that we're in control of.
Yeah, really interesting. I think that's definitely about, you know, taking care of yourself seems to be a like big theme in that you're talking about, like looking after, like not trying to force things and trying to look at things holistically and what the world has to offer you. That kind of nicely leads me on to, because you've spoken before in an interview about how 90% of the job isn't actually the acting. It's about looking after yourself, your sense of self-preservation, kind of making those connections. I wondered if you could talk a bit more about that specifically in terms of looking at the communities that you have around you and the people, the company you keep, and how that has perhaps helped and influenced your career and your personal development.
Yeah, I mean, it's again that thing. I don't know, like, I kind of remember being at drama school. I don't know what your experience of it is, but I remember thinking like the be all and end all of my entire life were those four walls and those people in those four walls, and there was nothing that mattered at all outside of that. And acting was everything, and that was my entire kind of like calling, and all my kind of like struggles needed to be related to that, etc., etc. And obviously our craft and our artistry is incredibly important and should be vital and should feel like it's crucial to us, but not at the expense of life and not at the expense of the world. And the more you do it, the more you realize that the two speak to each other, you know? So like, like you were about to say, like the company I keep, the people I surround myself with, the conversations that I have kind of like influence my politics, and my politics influences my work. You know, like I don't feel like those two things are separated from each other. I do one because of the other, and I have one because of the other. You know, so like I think it's about cultivating a more four-dimensional 360-degree appreciation of what it means to be like growing up and existing in this world, in this life, in this big 2020 right now, and thinking about how your work can speak to that, as opposed to putting your work at the very top of the tree of priorities and being like, I have to get to that show, or I have to get to that awards, or I have to, you know, be motivated by something external, and kind of like allowing your kind of like, self guarding eye to slack a little bit. It's got to come from the inside out.
Okay. So when you speak about motivation there, I mean, because it was actually one of the questions that I had from students, but I might as well ask it now. I mean, a lot of people have asked, what motivates you? Like what drives your career? Because obviously, I mean, let's talk about the work you've been involved with for a second. I mean, you've done a lot of TV and film, you know, Kiri, I May Destroy You. You've done, Hamlet at the RSC. I mean, you can't forget to mention that. You've got an impressive resume already, and your career, I mean, for me personally, I've got to say, I admire it so much. A lot of milestones in there already, but what's next, if you don't mind? You know, what do you have a path, an aim, a goal, or you seem like you're in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've been incredibly fortunate to be given the opportunities that I've been given, you know, and it's if you could have like asked me what I wanted to do 8 years ago and then presented this as a potential option, I would have like called the ambulance on you. Do you know what I mean? But like, I've been really fortunate and worked really hard in order to do all of those things. In terms of like looking, but like, yeah, it is for me, it's still very much looking forwards as opposed to looking backwards. Like I think it's important to recognize achievements and recognize things that you're proud of and mark that, but not to dwell on those things too much, you know, not to, you know, get too gassed about like things that in the moment might seem like big achievements, but like eventually kind of like pale into the middle distance. But like, I think for me, it's just about continuing to, number one, expand my craft and expand my kind of like learning, you know, because like, it feels like I still haven't been, it just feels like I still haven't been doing this that long. And I still feel like there are basic things that I'm just like, how do you do that? Or, you know, and I still like go on set or go on into the rehearsal room every single time and watch people, and I'm just like bowled over by their talent and their craft and their commitment. And it's about like that kind of skill share. We're very fortunate as actors particularly to be able to be working alongside other people all the time. If you're a costume designer, for example, you don't actually spend that much time with other costume designers generally. Or if you're like the composer, or if you're, you know, the head of production, you don't spend that much time watching other people doing what you're doing. So we're very lucky to be in the same room as other people who are doing what we're doing. And I think it's important to continue kind of like having a respect for that and a desire and a thirst and a hunger to learn that, add more strings to your bow, and to just expand and deepen craft. So as I move forward, I'm just like looking for more opportunities to be able to do that.
Okay, nice. I wanted to, because when you mentioned drama schools, obviously without any names, we're not out here just to cuss individual institutions, but we've highlighted, post George Floyd, post Black Lives Matter, Black Liberation Movement UK, there was a light massively shed on the institutions that I'm currently a part of, used to be a part of, and people started listening. People started listening for once, and I think there was a big shift, in my opinion. But I wanted to get your view on, do you believe that these institutions have it in them to make the changes that you have spoken about may be necessary, or that we as people of colour, or anyone that is misrepresented or underrepresented, do you think that it will happen?
I always say that I kind of like look at it with hope rather than optimism, because it's like you say, it's so hard to kind of even think of things as being post, etc. Like, we're still in the midst of a long struggle that started a long time ago and still got a long way to go. I feel like in terms of like making steps towards where we need to be, a lot of institutions are at least kind of like saying the right things, or at least kind of like putting their hands up and admitting to certain things historically and presently. It's always about how that is converted into action. And with all the goodwill in the world, it takes more than goodwill to convert that into action. It involves sacrifice, it involves perseverance, it involves loss, it involves a lot of like difficult things, and people need to give up a lot of privileges, so that's why I'm always like thinking with hope rather than optimism, because I'm hopeful that people have got empathy and care and are able to put themselves in other people's shoes, and therefore show like from an elemental level a desire to rebalance and redress imbalance. So I can think about that hopefully, but I mean, from my own experience, it's difficult to be optimistic about it, because there are always so many reasons, or people will always find reasons to slow down progress or even to stop it and reverse it. So I think the good work that societies like yours and people like you are doing will help us along the way to where we need to be. And there are other allies who will also kind of like play their part in getting us there. But it's a long road and it's an arduous road. So I think it's about having courage, energy, and perseverance.
Do you think you talk about being a long road, because back in 2016 when you did Hamlet, you spoke about the reductionist view of calling you the first Black Hamlet. Like, you played Hamlet, the colour. I found that really, because there's a lot of questions happening at the moment about okay, well, do we kind of positive discrimination, which doesn't exist, but like, do we just cast everyone in the season is going to be a Black director, or all Black cast and Black plays and this, that, and the other? I suppose what I'm asking is, how do you think that these industries, are there any kind of common mistakes that you see happening that you think with that goodwill and those good intentions, they're just actually doing stuff that may be more damaging or reductionist than what they actually mean it to be?
I definitely think so, because I think, like, it's low hanging fruit, because the temptation in order to kind of like solve racism is to, if you're like a theatre company, is to do exactly what you're saying, make sure that all the actors are, a certain race, or all the actors are women, or all the directors are not able-bodied or whatever, and that suddenly solves whatever the discrimination is. But like, often you'll find yourself You'll find companies doing that and putting certain people in positions where the surrounding structures have not also been amended in order to make the space safe for those people. You know, so like I feel like there's no point making a cosmetic change, a surface, public facing, purely cosmetic change if everything underneath and everything behind it remains the same, because that is not sustainable, and that's not meaningful change. You know, it has to come from the highest levels and the deepest levels of these organizations and institutions. It's the same as like changing the mannequins in the shop window, but nothing in the actual shop, you know? So I think that's the big temptation, isn't it? Is to do what's easy, because it's very easy to kind of like say, look, we're going to make this one actor look like this, or we're going to make this, you know, public facing thing look like this, but change nothing in the office or change nothing in the working practices. And then you therefore start putting people in dangerous positions or unsafe positions. So it's about meaningful and cultural changes that go all the way through the DNA of these organizations.
I think one thing that last bit you touched on when you're saying otherwise you risk putting people in unsafe positions. I think that's something that's speaking to actors that I work with and people at other institutions. That's something that people have been feeling currently and are still kind of experiencing, this kind of notion of in this change, they're actually being possibly more compromised by being exposed to themes and genres that they don't want to explore. Actually, they were happier without exploring that, or rather they were happier without it being thrust upon them. For example, themes of slavery and being asked to play an enslaved person, etc. What do you, because you've spoken about kind of stuff before that happened to you in drama school, and playing those mental gymnastics was the quote you used about, you know, kind of having to deal with that and how you spin it to just, you know, play those parts and go through that class. But what advice, I mean, now having been in the industry and a certain amount of autonomy that you can, you know, empower, what would you say to, you know, a young person or any person of any age that is facing those unsafe environments, that maybe doesn't quite know how to call it out or is being exposed to something they don't feel comfortable with? Is there anything that you've learned in your journey that might help?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I would love to be able to just say, look, whenever you like find yourself confronted by these kind of situations, just speak loud and, you know, make your voice heard and say no and whatever. But I mean, like, I know the reality is that it's not always easy or even possible for people, especially with the power dynamics as they exist within the industry and within educational institutions. It's really difficult. Let's say you're within a drama school where like your casting, for example, for the final year show is at the behest of so-and-so teacher. You don't want to say you're racist or you're making me feel unsafe or you're I don't know what to, I don't want to do what you're telling me to do, because like they've got a certain level of control over, or a certain level of input over the kind of future of your ambitions. So I get that. I think there's strength in numbers and there's strength in education. So even now, like I feel like there's the vocabulary and there's the precedent and there's the material easily accessible for everyone to be able to educate themselves to a certain degree about how to make a progressive, safe, inclusive environment for all students and for all performers and for all artists. It's not like you've got to go into like some next library in the back and beyond and find some really like specific book written in Old English to be able to figure out how to do it. The material is there. So I feel that material needs to be circulated far and wide, and the responsibility again is on the organizations and the institutions to do that. That then makes it easier for people to call things out, because we are operating from a more shared vocabulary. You know, it's suddenly everyone knows what unconscious bias means, and therefore we're not in a position where like people are taking it personally to be accused of that. That's just something about condition. That's just something about the world that we live in. There's also strength in numbers. If you feel like, I remember like my kind of experiences, sometimes I was going through these things and like there weren't, there were 3 people of color in my entire drama school when I was there. And sometimes you go through these things and you feel very alone, but you basically feel mad because you're like, rah, did that really happen? Or did that person really say that? And am I actually being too sensitive, or is everyone going through? You start feeling mad, you know. But like that's particularly exacerbated when you go through it by yourself. But there is strength in numbers, and I feel like it's our responsibility collectively to be able to talk to people who share our experience and also people who don't. You know, there's got to be a kind of unity and community when we're approaching these topics. It can't just be like ethnic minorities talking about like racism, and it can't just be women talking about sexism, and it can't just be able-bodied people talking about ableism. You know, it's got to be something that's shared. So there's definitely strength and security in numbers that allows education to go forward. So I would really kind of like push that as a means of dealing with those situations. Support each other.
I think, yeah, I appreciate those. I think that's something that would definitely go a long way. A lot of people are kind of struggling with change at the moment, and how it's kind of the ways that we're trying to affect change. That even us as an organisation trying to, when you're talking about, you know, it's not just women that have to speak about sexism. You know, we're setting up an ACS at Mountview, for example. Like, obviously, we recognise that of all the ethnicities other than white, we are the largest denomination. However, there are multiple others. So by virtue of our numbers, we can create an ACS, and we have the numbers to be able to do that. But what about the Latinx community, or the Filipino, or the Malaysian? You know, all of these different. And I think that's difficult sometimes, because you don't want to jump in and speak for them. You don't want to, you know, it's like white explaining. I don't always want someone to tell me how I should feel or what my history is. But I think sometimes, yeah, like you say, it's about education, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's about the dialogue being open. It's not, of course, it's never about like telling someone what their experience is and telling someone how they should feel and how they should respond and what they should be doing. It shouldn't be that, but it should be an open dialogue of asking with curiosity and generosity of spirit and open-heartedness, what is your experience and how does that affect you, and how and where are we similar and where aren't we? You know, it's that kind of like dialogue and sharing of experience that allows people to feel included as opposed to alienated.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I think got some student questions that I'll get onto. Because I've been chatting for a while now. We got one from Aoife. Do you have any affirmations or mantras?
Do I have any affirmations or mantras? Not in a literal sense. I don't think I haven't got anything like written on my bedroom wall or anything like that. Not that I'm against that. It's something that I've got a lot of friends who do that and do it very not religiously, but do it with much commitment and success, actually. So I don't necessarily have affirmations, but I definitely do have things that I've got quite weird ways of working, you know, so I can be quite obsessive and I can be quite, I just think preparation is God, you know, like the more prepared you are, it's always going to go better. And like preparation doesn't mean necessarily like making sure you've read every single Shakespearean sonnet and know it off by heart, or spending like the whole night before an audition, like learning your lines desperately to make sure that you can do it. But it just means like figuring out what works for you and doing it with commitment and doing it with all your energy and allowing yourself to like enter whatever room that you're actually working in with a bedrock and foundation of preparation from which you can take what you need and get rid of what you don't. But I just think like, yeah, you've got to prepare to succeed.
Awesome. Got one from Yasmin, who is our ACS president. What is your greatest accomplishment as an actor?
Probably getting out of bed in the morning. Yeah, greatest accomplishment is I think I'm really proud of the projects that I've said yes to and the projects that I've said no to, if that makes sense, because sometimes it's really, obviously you're in an incredibly lucky position if you're able to say no to things, but sometimes it's really hard, you know, because it's like, it goes back to that kind of like mentality of like, who am I to do that, and how can I deserve to have this opportunity that someone else might not, and not take it. But being able to say no in many different ways is the most powerful thing that you have as a freelancer. And that can take any number of different forms, you know. That could be like saying no to doing an extra shift at the pub in order to stay at home and prepare for an audition or something like that. It's just like, it requires bravery, and it requires confidence in your own ability and confidence in your instincts to be able to say no to things. And there's been like some things that I've said no to that have been really difficult to say no to, that I'm glad that I did, because it's allowed me to like keep the integrity of the work that I do. And it's allowed me to kind of like always be proud of the things that I do, because that's the one thing that you want to do. You want to be proud of of the work that you do.
Okay. Yeah, I think that resonates with a lot of people. I have quite a long one from Masejo. She asks, we've all heard about actors struggling to separate themselves from their character, often taking these emotional extremes home with them and affecting their daily lives. You've played characters that have had quite difficult emotional journeys. How do you separate yourself from that and not take it home? Method or not method?
I'm not very method, but I do often take my shit home with me, so maybe I am. But like, I think I find it quite important to mark the end of the day with something, whatever it is. It could be something really informal, like just like, you know, going to have a drink at the pub with like the people you're working with, or having a conversation with someone outside of the project about something else, or, you know, like having dinner with a friend or your partner or whatever. I think it's quite important to just mark the end of the day before you kind of like go into your house in some way, or even after you go into your house in some way, because again, and I don't know if this is just me, I think as actors we can kind of like get turned on by the idea of like, it's taking everything from us, and we're putting every single hour of the day into what we do, and it's just like so like tortured and important and so good, you know, we're so great. Like, I think we can get kind of seduced into doing that, and like it goes back to what I said at the top of the session. Like, number one, it's not by force, and number two, like, it shouldn't be at the expense of life, you know. Like, we do this for life and we do it to reflect life, but we don't do it to replace life. So I think it's just about like, yeah, marking the kind of boundaries around which that you work.
Yes, and something about like reflected life, and it's something that I was thinking when I was watching I May Destroy You over lockdown. I was looking at kind of attitudes to social media and kind of app culture, stuff like that. You're as an actor, you're on social media. You're quite active on social media, I'd say, compared to some people. Maybe you disagree. I don't know.
I mean, I think I'm actually very careful with my social media, and like, maybe I am active in comparison to some people, but I'm definitely less active than a lot of people.
Yeah. But I mean, how, as a tool, because there's something that we speak about in the industry a lot, especially as people looking, you know, that are graduating soon and looking to get into the industry. But everyone's like, okay, what are the top tips of how do you break in? How do you break the industry? You know, how do you get people to know your name? And one of the big things is social media, yes or no. Kind of what's your stance on that? How do you think you've used it? Can it be used for good, or is it solely an evil?
Yeah, I mean, I proper don't have the answer to that. It's so risk rewards, social media. It's like, because I know some people who are like amazing at it and it works for them, you know, and like I'd be lying if I said that there wasn't like, no one pays. I'd be lying if like if I said no one pays attention to how many followers you've got on Instagram at any time, doesn't happen all the time, but like if they're putting you up for the lead in like, you know, whatever massive franchise, and it's you versus someone else, and you both look the same and you're both as good as each other, they'll go with the one with most Instagram followers. That said, personally, I don't actually know how you control that. I know some people do know how you control that, but I don't know how you control how many followers you can get. I don't know how to do it. And the real danger, I think, of social media is when it starts to control you as opposed to you controlling it. When it's got a hold on you as opposed to you having a kind of like decisiveness and deliberateness over it. And that's really dangerous, I think, because like that's when it like really intersects with like mental health issues. And I like, for me, like it's just, I just find it so hard. Like 10 times a week I'm deleting apps off of my phone and re-downloading them on the sly, or like going into like Google Chrome or Safari and just like having a little, it is hard. I'm not gonna lie, it's hard. But like I think it's just about having like a consciousness about what your relationship to it is. Because like I think if you kind of get lazy with it and think, you know, I kind of only do it because I'm curious, or I only do it because you know, it's funny or whatever. Great if that's true, but you need to check yourself, and you need to be like strict with yourself as to whether that's true or not. Because like these like, look, I watch The Social Dilemma still, you know, and these like things are like designed particularly to like get you, you know. So I'm not out here trying to pretend I'm superhuman and like smarter than Zuckerberg or whatever. I just think you need to like really check why you're on social media and what you're using it for.
Yeah. Everything good?
I'm all good.
I think cut out to an end, but I think there was one thing that I definitely wanted to talk about, which was, truth be told, I didn't really know how to approach it, but I May Destroy You was fantastic. I think a lot of people had questions about it, but I wanted to focus on the kind of the unique telling of app culture, rape culture, consent, sexual identity. The story was packed with so much, and in a format that was really condensed. I mean, what, 10 episodes? 10 episodes, I think.
Episodes, yeah, 12
yeah.
half an hour episodes.
Yeah, I mean that's a condensed format, especially to follow, you know, multiple narratives. What was your first of all? What was your first thoughts when you kind of sat down? Because you and Michaela Cole are close friends, you went to drama school together. What was your first thought when kind of the idea was presented to you, and how to approach character like that, and kind of what were the pressures of representing something that a lot of people won't have seen before, an urban London that is real?
Yeah. What are my first thoughts? Look, when I first read it, I was like, I maybe get like 40% of this so far. I get like 40% of it. And like, it was pretty much as it came out in the final thing. It's pretty much that. Like, obviously, like small, like there were edits and everything, and like small story shifts, but it was pretty much there. But like you say, it was so sprawling, and it's so visual, and it's so physical. I think actually, especially what you're talking about, like capturing London particularly and capturing culture, is sonic and visual, and you know, you can't quite get it just by reading it on the page. But it was exciting because it was like I'm seeing and encountering these characters that I have grown up with, and that I know are real, and I know are vibrant, and I know I haven't really seen in this way on television. And I'm like, that's exciting. It's scary, and the challenge is great, and you can really mess it up, and you need the requisite support and leadership to be able to make it happen and to actualize it. but it's exciting to be given the opportunity to do it. And that show was all about opportunity. It was about giving opportunity and giving space to parts of our lives and parts of our communities and our world that we've kind of like had both in the kind of like front vision and background for generations, you know, decades, like, and for it to be kind of like showcased on BBC One particularly is a big deal, you know. So it was a mixture of kind of like what's going on, excitement, and then like, wow, we really need to be on job for this, because it's not minor. It's not like, it's not, we're taking like real people's experiences who are going to be encountering themselves on television for the first time. We can't do it by half. We can't kind of like approximate. It has to be spot on. So yeah, the responsibility was there as well, but it was mainly like, wow, this is potentially exciting.
So I think, I mean, I've spoken to several people about it, and all anyone's saying is just thank you for being a part of that. Thank you for bringing that to life, and for creating a world, and not just in London, many urban cities. You know, I think that was what was also beautiful about it, is people can relate to that narrative, often in places that you wouldn't normally think of. You know, it doesn't matter where you are around the world, people have there's intersections everywhere. I think my last question, I suppose, to wrap up, would be one that was the most common question, which I think says a lot about everyone's kind of state of mind right now, is, do you have any words of wisdom or just key bits of advice for graduates in 2021 in this climate right now, in general or with COVID? But I think most people are, to be honest, looking in this climate was advice.
I go back to what I was saying before of it's unprecedented. You know, it's been a long time, at least, since there's been a kind of like event that has put our whole world in jeopardy in the way that this has. And obviously that also really affects more specifically our industry and our kind of like near future in terms of the jeopardy that it's in. And it's a lot, you know, theatres are in real danger. Television and film companies seem to be being a little bit more kind of more risk averse and all of that. There's a lot of reasons to, you know, be scared and be anxious and be stressed. Number one, I think it's important that we do not ignore that, and we like accept that, and we hold steady with it. You know, we hold steady with the reality of the world that we're in, but also remember that we are robust, right? We are robust, and life is all about challenges, and every single one of the graduates that are going to be graduating this year, next year, have been through challenges that have got them even to this point. You know, it's a huge achievement even to get to the point of graduating from top drama school in this country. It's amazing, you know. The challenge goes on, and you've got to hold steady with that. But also, it's about, like, if possible, having like the kind of courage to have to be able to look at this moment from a point of perspective and vantage, and thinking, okay, right now it's mad, but like today is even very different from today 6 weeks ago, and definitely different from today 6 months ago. And the same will be true in 6 weeks' time and in 6 months' time, you know? So we can only kind of like exist in the moment. We can only kind of like respond to what's happening now, but we have to hold steady with the truth and reality of what that is, and be brave, be courageous, and be robust. Because I think the reality is also there is going to be a huge explosion of creativity that comes out of the other side of this. There's been so many writers, directors, producers, musicians, dancers, choreographers, everyone who have had wings clipped and have kind of like been put in a box, i.e. their houses, with nothing to do but think and generate and all of that. And there will be a kind of like moment of explosion and sharing of work. And then we'll be thinking, wow, we're so glad that we kind of like held steady with that moment to be able to engage with this. But look after yourself, make sure you kind of like still like sleep well, drink lots of water, maintain community and maintain community and like be with the people that you love and like keep your mind and body healthy and safe and hold steady.
So, I mean that, yeah. I've been hanging off with a lot of words. When we get off this, I'm just gonna ask the recording and take loads of notes, to be honest. No, I've really enjoyed chatting. I would love for another opportunity like this again, especially when the world's a bit calmer and freedom of movement.
Yeah. I'm sure we can make it happen. It's been a real pleasure and privilege and honor to talk to you. So, oh my God, my laptops are about to run out of battery, so it's obviously perfect. I'm in, but I'm really proud of you and you and what you're achieving, and I'm so excited to see where you guys will go in the very near future.
Thank you so much, and thank you wrapping up to Mountview Live. Never done this before, so kind of winging it. But yeah, to wrap up, thank you so much, Paapa, for coming and being my guest on my first ever and the ACS's first ever Mountview Live. And yeah, big up season 4 Mountview Live. Bless up everyone and take care. Hope you're all safe at home.
There is.